All right, we are live. This is not a recording, but it will be recorded. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on our cybersecurity awareness training for healthcare professionals. With me, I have very talented folks, and we're going to be going through a couple slides here. So stick with us throughout this process, and hopefully, you'll come away with some great stories to tell your peers who weren't able to join us today. And please, please, please ask questions in the chat. If you are wondering where that is, it is on the right-hand side of your screen. So anytime that you have a question, comment, or concern, please throw it in there. And then I get to do my favorite piece of the pie, which is to interrupt our guest speakers. So this is designed to be interactive. It is designed to be a conversation. Just because you can actually see our faces and we can't see yours, that does not mean that we don't want you to be a part of this conversation. So please, I guess it is on the right, not the left. Never mind. It is on the right. The chat is on the right. So please use the chat if you can find it. If you want to mute it, because it is going to ding to let you know about the activity that's going on, you can mute it if you want. It's through that little bell sign. Just make sure it says / and then you're good to go. As I mentioned, this is going to be recorded and sent to you after we are done wrapping this up. And then you also will get the slide deck so that you can share this internally as well. So those are our 2 promises for you there. As I mentioned, we have some talented people on the screen. I will start with Fred Langston. He is in the middle of my screen. He's wearing glasses, not in his picture, but on our screen in case you're confused on which one he is. He's going to be running the show when it comes to all things HIPAA related, HHS related, and any other acronym that we're going to cover today. Fred is going to be the man with the job. Then we also have Mike Hamilton here as well. He's co-founder of Critical Insight, and he'll be sharing some of the different examples for things that you should not be clicking on. And then as for me, as I mentioned, I am the interrupter of this meeting. So any questions that you have, I'm happy to answer them, as well as any questions at the end when it comes to collateral, training, or any other resources we can present to you.
Okay, so let's get going here. So if you don't know us, we're Critical Insights. We are a combination of managed and professional services that in aggregate can be your whole program or any piece of your program that you need to pull off a shelf. We do penetration testing, we do 24/7 monitoring, we do incident response, we do risk assessments, we do all the things that you need to do. And if you don't have the people to do it, we're here for you. Okay, that was the commercial. Fred, let's go.
Yeah. All right. So unlike our normal presentations where I get to provide glib commentary, we're going to move very rapidly today because this is truly formal training. What you're going to receive today is a little different than what you may have expected because HIPAA, when you're giving training in a HIPAA context, you need to talk about the regulation and understanding some of the components and what it means to have a breach, because that's what they expect everyone that handles EPHI or electronic protected health information. So we're going to talk about where's security important, right? We're on a little primer again on where we need to be thinking about how we're protecting data. Talk about policies, some definitions, because HIPAA wants you to know what these definitions are. Wants you to understand what is a potential EPHI exposure. What do you do to protect against that? What kinds of things can you do? And if it happens, what are your responsibilities at that point? And then Mike will jump in at that point and he'll go into some actual threats. He'll show you things that would lead to some of these bad things potentially happening. Next slide, please. So at work, it seems obvious, but we need to think about EPHI or any PII or sensitive data. We always think about it in our workstations or our laptops. Do we think about it as often on the printers and those multifunction devices? Probably not. They are actually weakly secured in general, although they've gotten better. We always think about our servers, but we have to think about things that end up in paper, the things that come off that printer and the things that get filled out and put into file cabinets. We need to make sure we're securing those. There are things that end up on disks. If we're doing hot backups onto disk or tapes, those are moving through our environment and potentially out to long-term storage. Of course, email, but we're also moving into a world where there's stuff moving over our phones and over things like Slack and Trello and Teams. So if you're using any of these collaborative tools, if you're using your phone, if it's part of a telehealth environment that you're delivering services over, you need to consider those as a key place where data may also be exposed. And then there's the places we're trying to share data with customers. Most in the old days, I'll say most people had a secure file transfer station in which to move secure data. Now, most people are using it built into their EMR, things like MyChart and Epic and things like that. Next slide, please. But again, we're not always in the office when we're at work anymore. Many of us are working remotely. Some of us are working in a car, might be in a bar or a restaurant, but certainly our home office, or potentially when we're traveling, we're continuing to work, right? Nobody's really completely disconnected from work anymore. So if you're working in your home office, what does that mean? Well, it means if you have kids running in and out of your house and 3 generations of sports teams that are migrating through the house over a weekend, you do not want to leave your work stuff open where they can come by and potentially do something, steal some data, see some data, expose some data. Even if it's inadvertent, it still might be a reportable breach. So we want to keep our data secure even when we're working, but not necessarily in the office. Next slide, please. Again, at home, this is important to all of us. Think about, and why is it important to protect yourself from a personal level? Well, if your personal assets become compromised, it is not a huge stretch to then potentially migrate over to your company assets. In other words, if I get your email password and it happens to also be your home computer's password, and you log into work from that home computer, I now can be able to intercept those communications and do bad things. So we need to protect ourselves when we're at home, when we're shopping, when we're doing things like Facebook and LinkedIn, gaming, surfing, our smartphones. If we're plugging our smartphones into our computers, make sure you're doing that only to recharge the phone, or if it's your personal phone, it is being connected to your personal computer to move photos on and off. Do not move your photos on and off on your work computer, because you have to enable a active connection that allows what's on your phone to touch what's on your work computer. If you're moving those photos up, allowing a path for malware that may be on your phone to then move on up to your work computer. And then remember, people are going to try to trick you in a number of ways. Commonly, we think about phishing emails, but it's actually easier to have a phone fraud, or what they call vishing or voice phishing, or smishing, SMS phishing, where we're going to talk somebody into do something not through email, but through a voice. And you know what? When you're on the hook and somebody's talking to you, you don't have time to look at the email header and examine it and wonder if it's real or not. Somebody's asking you for an answer right away. That can be very compelling and easy to talk you out of information, like an account number, maybe a health account number, something like that. So remember, you're at risk at home, and it can affect what happens at work. Next slide, please. And in public, so if we're out moving around through the public sphere, if you're using Wi-Fi, it's a good idea to use a VPN. It gives you some level of privacy. You should probably be using only connecting to work assets. If you're using your work computer, you should probably not be using it to surf around to every site like Gmail and Facebook and things like that. And don't send sensitive information if it's not encrypted. Don't rely on Wi-Fi encryption to be the level of encryption that is going to protect your data, because it is unfortunately something that is relatively easy to crack. And think about your phone when you have things like these new features like Bluetooth and near field communications. Well, it's not a great idea to be able to share everything on your phone by holding it up to another phone, because they can also grab data at the same time. And think about other things that potentially can be compromised, like a wireless mouse. You can be sitting in a plane, and if you're using a wireless mouse, somebody next to you that has the same model can actually be operating your mouse, and you may not have any control over that. So there are a lot of things that can happen with these connected devices. And when you're out in public, right, for your own personal protection, think about where you're using things like credit cards. It's as simple as somebody shoulder surfing to actually steal your PIN. There are credit card skimmers, which are so small now, they're virtually undetectable. At this point, losing a credit card is kind of, I probably have I have one card that gets compromised 3 or 4 times every year. And it's either from vendors or it could be from skimmers, but you're protected somewhat when you're using credit cards. You're not as protected using a debit card. Also, remember that your laptop, if you're walking around out and it has EPHI on it, one of the more famous breaches was a car was stolen that had a laptop in the trunk that had EPHI in it, and it was not encrypted. And that entity had to report that every record they had was stolen because they did not have that laptop with EPHI in it with whole disk encryption. So think about making sure that if you're ever out moving around in the world, that data should be encrypted at rest. And that is what you get with BitLocker encryption, for example, built into Windows. Think about line of sight issues. If you're out there working while you're waiting for a plane or to some public transportation, somebody can be sitting behind you and be copying medical records. It's real easy to copy 3 or 4 records while you're sitting there working, leaning over your shoulder. And thumb drives. Do not use a thumb drive that you use at home for pictures or vacation stuff or sharing recipes with your work computer. A USB drive used at work should only be used in the computer you're using with and other work computers, and never pick up a USB drive you find somewhere and plug it into any of your devices. This is an old-fashioned trick that is new-fashioned again this year. This has been a resurgence of this particular attack technique where they just distribute USB devices all over the place. People think, oh, cool, free USB device. Plug it in, they've compromised your computer. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about how do we control things within the environment, and what things do you as a member of an organization that handles EPHI need to be aware of, and that is policies. There are corporate policies that are put in place to increase security. So they may be ones that you don't really know about. It talks about how at a technical level we do some specific management activities. But the things that you know about are things like handling of EPHI, privacy policies, acceptable use policies, all these things that rely to how do I, as an employee of this organization, work within the guidelines and the regulations. So, A, I'm not putting my company at risk. I'm not putting a patient data at risk. And ultimately, I'm not putting myself at risk. Because if you're ultimately responsible, you may lose your job, right? So there's other reasons we have policies too, though, to satisfy particular audit requirements. So there are particular audit assertions and certifications you can obtain about how well you're secured your organization, and those policies are foundational for that as well. Next slide, please. So know that you have policies, and know that you have policies you need to adhere to. I'll give you this broad brush. If you want to see the policies, it seems to be a little bit stuck. There we go. This is a broad brush of the policies your organization probably has. It may have some different names, may have a few more, may have a few less. This is about the standard amount that we see at a standard healthcare organization, the policies they have. This does not include some things that may be very specific to you as a user, like particular privacy policies and particular EPHI handling policies. So understand that there will be policies that you will be handed, and you will have to attest in some way as to either receiving, read and will adhere to, right? You will have some statement as to having received and understood that you need to adhere to these policies. So understand there's a rich set of policies that govern how your organization is being operated. Next slide, please. All right. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some definitions. This may be, of course, you may say, of course, but for those that aren't sure, and of course, DHHS wants us to reiterate this: protected health information. This is any of that data about the provision of care, physical or mental health, or the condition of a particular individual, and it can be related to provision of care. It can be related to billing. It can be related to statistical analysis and research that goes into use of that particular data. When we're talking about protected health information, that's paper, that's electronic, it's in any form, right? So we need to protect it in any form. But when we really think about, when we're thinking about an IT infrastructure, is electronic protected health information. That's any APHI that's stored, transmitted, or processed in your organization, right? So you should have data flow maps and understand where all of your EPHI is. That's a requirement. That's part of your HIPAA risk assessment. Should include data flows that shows where every piece of EPHI goes in your organization. And then there's other things that can come into play, like what's called SAMHSA, which is mental health services. So there may be other regulatory components you need to comply with above and beyond HIPAA, right? So it's not just HIPAA. There's also privacy laws. We're going to talk about those as well as we move through this. Next slide, please. So know that you're covered under all these. Know also that you do not have to be a covered entity. In other words, I don't have to be a hospital or a doctor's office or an insurance company. I may be a supplier of services. I process medical billing. I do medical billing collections on behalf of a healthcare organization. That's a business associate. That's a huge world. There are more business associates than there actually are healthcare providers themselves, because there's this whole ecosystem of people that supply all the things that make the healthcare world operate. So if you're a business associate, you are now, as of 2008 and the HIPAA high-tech extension, it says business associates, you are just as responsible for being compliant with HIPAA as your covered entities are now. You will then also receive a business associate agreement. It's a contract. And it's where your covered entities will pass down and say, here's exactly what we require you to do to keep us and yourself in compliance with HIPAA. So this is this ecosystem of this third-party vendor ecosystem and the business associate agreements that pass HIPAA requirements down to those entities, so they have to comply as well. Next slide, please.
Before we leave this slide, let me just bring up some current events. This business about business associates being technically under the purview of HIPAA is a big deal. Lately, most of the big data breaches are coming through business associates. They are the unlocked window that someone is crawling through in order to get to the covered entity. And lately, some of the numbers of records that have been exposed are jaw-dropping. Very recent news, the Health and Human Services just posted the 4 of the largest, and there are news articles out today talking about these. So business associate agreement is a very, very important component. As Fred says, that's a contract, and the terms in there are going to be extremely relevant if that business associate is responsible for your records loss.
Yep. All right, next slide, please. Okay, more definitions. It's a little bit slow. There we go. So what we're going to talk about here is there are clauses in the regulation they expect you to understand that mean you need to report if in fact data has been breached. So there's these breach notification rules. It applies to business associates as well. Well, that notification period is 60 days in HIPAA. But California Privacy Act says medical records, if it's a California citizen, it's 15 days. There are other regulations that are about to hit the ground. Some of them are as short as 4 days that say it's PII. It doesn't matter if it's HIPAA or not. It's PII, and you have 4 days to notify. So you really need to get on top of what does it mean when we see a breach? How quickly do we need to notify? How quickly do we need to conduct our investigations? And as Mike was alluding to, this additional component here is these particular subcontractors now, well, there's a new push by Health and Human Services to say IR plans for a covered entity must include anyone that handles your EPHI. So that means not only your business associates, but if they're handing it off downstream to a secondary business associate, you need to know about that. And you need to understand how that secondary business associate is going to interact with your organization in the instance of a breach, especially if the breach is on that secondary business associate. So they're getting very detailed on how they want you to look at this. This stuff can't be left to chance anymore. Now they're telling you have to include all of these people in this incident response process. Next slide, please.
And if anyone is interested, the reference there is NIST 800-66R2.
There you go. So let's talk about what happens, right, when a breach occurs. So what is an incident when we're talking about HIPAA? There's a lot of legal kind of terminology here. It could be a violation of policies, acceptable use policies, practices. But really what it's talking about is that EPHI has been exposed. So ultimately what we're really concerned with under HIPAA or the Privacy Acts are if that regulated data has been exposed to an entity who does not should not have access to that data. So it could be not necessarily a bad guy stole it. It could be we sent all this data to the wrong insurance company, and this other insurance company now has 500 records of some other and people that they are not insured and should not have access to that data. So breaches can happen in any number of ways, not just by hacking or something like that. Next slide, please. So the types of things you'd expect are, the system breaches that you may have heard about, where people are hack into a network and they're able to steal data, expose data, potentially erase data or change data. So if they have access, they don't necessarily have to have done anything, right? They may have just looked at it, but just the act of looking at it is enough to say that that data has been disclosed. So that's unauthorized disclosure. Again, we can have unauthorized disclosure in any number of ways. It may be a hacker. It may be us doing something stupid. In fact, that doing something inadvertent, I don't want to say stupid, but that mistakes happen, folks. And that is a common way for disclosure to happen. It's a small amount of records when it happens. It may be a minimally reportable event. So it's a blip. It's not like you're getting up on the wall of shame. But if you send out 1 million records, or if you have set up an S3 bucket in AWS that is set to public, and all of your patient data is now exposed to the internet, you're going to be making a major announcement and breach disclosure notification. But there's also, what if the data is destroyed, right? Or changed? So we have to understand that unauthorized modification is a breach of data or destruction of data. So if we have ransomware, that's destruction of EPHI. Okay, now you got a breach, right? So a lot of people think, oh, it's ransomware. It can't be seen. Well, the destruction of data is included in these definitions. And then there's other things that can also be part of an exposure where it's something that actually happens in the physical world, where something is stolen, a laptop is stolen, somebody has done something where they breached the perimeter of the facility and may or may not have actually stolen files or something that was a computer that was sit out. So there are times where a physical incident can lead to an intrusion. And then there's disasters and things that are related to business continuity. So, if we have a flood and fire and we lose all that data, we've lost all that data, right? And we're still going to have to go through these processes. The other kinds, so what kinds of things happen? What are the hacking things that Mike is going to really dig into? Well, they can do a denial of service. This is something that ebbs and flows in popularity. This is where they maybe they've taken over thousands of home people's computers with what they call a botnet, all these malware bots, and they all attack a specific system at the same instance in time. And then they make it unable for that system to recover. and that system can no longer perform its activities. For example, they can do this against an EMR. They can take an Epic online instance of MyChart out of business by harnessing these botnets and putting all this traffic at it so no one else can get there. Malicious code. Okay, I clicked on malware and now I've got a virus and now it's spreading throughout my environment and it's doing ransomware and it's exfiltrating data and can be doing any number of things, crypto miners, any number of bad things. Or they may just be using the system to use the resources, right? I said crypto mining. They may just want to use your processor to make money for themselves. This is not uncommon on medical devices. Medical devices tend to be weakly secured. They tend to not be able to take security technology like an EDR or antivirus. So it's a great place to put a crypto miner. I'm going to have that medical device mine crypto coin for me while it's actually, doling out drug through a drug infusion pump. There's inappropriate usage. I think most people in healthcare are aware that the number one violation of privacy in healthcare environments are people that are curious about celebrities or people they know that have checked into the hospital and cannot help themselves but go look at their records. Sadly, this is one of the most most common inappropriate uses of methodologies. Talked about unplanned downtime. Many times it's a bunch of things that are happening all at once. You've got data exfiltration, you've got ransomware, you've got multiple attack vectors happening at the same time. So it may be a collection of problems that lead to a major exposure. Next slide, please. All right. So what kinds of things might you see or excuse me, things that might happen that you need to understand, or ways that these things can lead to bad things happening. So sharing passwords, we know that's a terrible idea. The second you've shared your password and account with somebody else, you've lost the audit trail. HIPAA requires a fully verifiable to an individual audit trail. If you have shared accounts with somebody else, you have now fully compromised that audit trail. If you've compromised the audit trail, you have to assume all records have been compromised, not just the ones you can prove have been compromised. Things about, don't put stickies on your workstation, especially if it's in a clinical environment where patients are moving in and out. Don't have the password posted on the computer there. Don't walk out while your workstation, while you're maybe in an operatory working with a patient and you are typing. Don't get up to go talk to the doctor and leave your system logged in, so that user could then go in and potentially change things. Again, falsification of information, theft, tampering, all these things can lead to bad outcomes. Also, how you dispose of things can lead to a bad outcome. If you're throwing away old hard drives, if you're allowing your multifunction device, your printer, scanner, copier, if they come in and replace that every 6 months, like a lot of them do, they're wheeling EPHI out the door. Those particular devices usually have a minimum of 3 hard disks in them, one of them recording everything that was ever printed on it. You do not want those leaving your environment without those devices being sanitized before they leave. And there are people. We always have people that get angry. They maybe decide they want to expose, they want to do something bad. They want to leave behind a bad memory because they're unhappy that they were terminated. So those are other areas where these things can lead to internal problems that lead to a breach. Next slide.
Okay, so I'm going to take it over from here. Thank you very much, Fred. So what you just heard was what you have to know. Okay, what we're going to go into now is what we think you need to know. We're going to show a bunch of examples of bait that is crossing your messaging platforms right now, and hopefully help you try to avoid these things. So first, let's ground ourselves, because cyber going on all the time is the best way to let somebody know that you learned all of this very recently. Okay, there are ways to talk about this in such a way that nobody will understand you. And then we can ground this in business terms, which is what we're going to do right now. So when we talk about scary Russian buffer overflow SQL injection, none of you are going to care about that. Here are the outcomes that you really want to avoid. Number one is unauthorized disclosure of protected health information. Fred just went into a whole lot of detail around that. That's required for you to receive during annual security awareness training. All right. Well, then there's theft. Theft through business email compromise. Theft is also somebody walking out the door with something, right? But theft used in the cyber world, a lot of this is business email compromise. And this turns out to be the biggest money loser that we have. This was $5 billion last year in the United States because people convinced people to reroute payments. That easy. All right. Then there's extortion. Everybody knows about ransomware and your network getting locked up. There's also extortion through distributed denial of service. We're just hurling so many packets at your perimeter or my chart, for example, that it just won't work. Okay. There's also extortion through the theft of records, and they hold those in abeyance and they say, either pay us or we make these public. And a whole lot of that is going on right now. And interestingly, a shift from use of ransomware to records theft held in abeyance has gone on for about the last year, largely because the federal government changed its rhetoric around the use of ransomware in critical infrastructure, which includes the healthcare sector. So they pivoted to records theft and extorting based on getting your records back and not making them public. It's bouncing back the other way right now. It's bouncing back to ransomware. It's an interesting trend to watch right now. Then there's intentional disruption, just knocking you down for the sake of knocking you down. And we're seeing a lot more use of things called wipers, which operates a bit like ransomware. It snarls up and locks up your network, but there is no decryption key for you to get back. They may even extort you and say, we'll help you get your data back. You're not getting your data back. That is just intentionally wiping you out. And then finally, being used to attack other business associates. All right. So there's 5 things that create a business impact that have quantifiable losses that you can use for risk management. Don't want to lose records, don't want to have money stolen, don't want to be extorted, don't want to be knocked down, and don't want to be used to attack others. All of these have the potential to affect patient care. And lately, some of the reporting has come out that this causes a regional impact when a hospital in particular gets hit by ransomware and cannot operate and everybody has to redirect. That causes a regional impact. So it's a bigger deal than just yourself. Okay, ransomware. Here's how it works. Starts the way everything else does. You get a little piece of unwanted software on a computer. When you get a piece of malware on a computer, okay, all we know is that's malware. Okay, it can steal your records. It can send spam. It can hit ad networks so that someone gets paid for that ad. Someone gets the ad revenue for that, and you're just paying for all the clicks. It can surveil your keystrokes to find out your passwords. Okay, or it can provide interactive access to someone probably on the other side of the world to come and go as they wish in your network. When they do this, they're going to go in, they're going to find your key servers, they're going to find your key records, they're going to find your backups, they're going to lay in encryption software, they're probably going to steal the records so that if you don't pay the extortion, then they will make your records public. And then it all comes down to one button push, and all the encryption software takes over and you can't use the network anymore. That's ransomware. And at that point, you're either going to get a phone call or a printer will spit out an extortion demand, or it will appear on screens and you will have to interact with criminals and negotiate what it's going to take to get your network back, probably with your insurance company leading those negotiations. That's ransomware. All right. Business email compromise. There's a few flavors of this. On the low end, I send you an invoice and you just pay it. It's under some threshold and you're not even going to worry about it. Okay. Well, a lot of money's lost that way. Kind of in the middle, you will receive some kind of messaging from the CEO or someone who is in a position of authority who is able to direct payments and things like that. And they will say, I need you to buy me some gift cards. I'm at a conference and I would like to give them away to our customers. Or I need you to do an emergency wire transfer. Okay. At the high end, someone in an organization that you are doing business with, a business associate, okay? So let's say that they are paying us for some service and their email system is compromised or our email system is compromised, and somebody sends them a message and says, "We've changed our bank, please reroute the payments from this point." And if there is no follow up and no phone call to check that, payment gets redirected, and you don't find out till a lot later that a whole lot of money is just evaporated. This happened to Mary's Place in the city of Seattle. It's a homeless shelter for women and children, and their email system was compromised. They contacted the city of Seattle. Some criminal contacted the city of Seattle from that mail system and said, "Here's our new bank account. Please start sending payments here." And nobody found out till $800,000 later. This is a big money loser in the United States and, in fact, globally. Okay. All right. So there's a couple of terms there, right? Here's how they get into your network. First of all, when you see things that are on the HIPAA wall of shame and they are doing these analyses to find out, well, how many of these were just from a personal mistake or someone lost a laptop versus hacking. All right. Well, when we talk about hacking, we're generally talking about exploiting a vulnerability. All right. What is a vulnerability? And I'm going to give you an example. So a long time ago, a program called SendMail, the original mail transport agent. It's not the thing that you type the email into. It's when you hit send, it's where the message goes that will figure out where it's got to go to get to its recipient. Okay, that's a mail transport agent. And when Eric Allman was writing SendMail a long time ago, he said, okay, now I need a variable for sender address. Let's see, the sender address will never be more than 255 characters, so I'm going to give it a 255 byte buffer space. What happens at byte or character 256 or 512 or 1742? You have overflowed the buffer. And if you do it just right, get that offset, that number of bytes in excess of 255 just right, you can put your choice of executable code into the running stack of the computer. You now own that computer. That's how a buffer overflow exploit works. These come out in products that you use all the time. All right. Cisco, this one about Move It. You've all probably heard about this. There was global carnage for all of those organizations that were notified of a vulnerability in this file transfer program called Move It that didn't get in front of it fast enough. And sure enough, now we have all kinds of records breaches and ransomware and extortion going on globally. We have a lot to say about that particular event, but you'll have to check that out in another one of our webinars because what is being reported is not, I don't think, complete about who's really behind that. In any event, they can break into your network by exploiting a vulnerability. How do you avoid that? Keep your stuff patched, okay, or updated. If you are a home and business user, we call that updating, okay? So right now, your iPhone is going to get some patches. Right now, your Windows computers just got patches for July. And in fact, if you look down at the bottom right in the tray, if you see a little orange dot down there, that means it's time to reboot your computer, and you need to do that to activate the patches. Your iPhone gets nasty with you. It says, I've been asking you for days to restart, so go ahead and go to sleep because when you wake up, it's just going to be done. If you are using Linux-based operating systems, you should review the auto update settings to make sure that it is indeed automatic. Now, if you are on the IT team and a vulnerability in a product that you use, which faces the internet, is announced, you need to drop what you are doing. This is an incident. There are groups all over the world, and they're not just criminals, they're nation states. And when a vulnerability like that is introduced into the public sphere, and all of a sudden everybody is going to start a race, we're going to get our stuff patched, or they're going to find us. And the efforts to find all those vulnerable systems starts immediately as soon as those vulnerabilities are announced. Okay. You need to treat a high severity vulnerability as an incident, or you end up being part of that global carnage that's going on right now. And especially when we're talking about the mobile systems that are used in healthcare, physicians' tablets. All right. I know they're grouchy about it, but they need to be updated routinely, like probably weekly. All right. All right. Now, we talked about breaking in networks. We will now talk about credential theft and abuse, because this is really the much bigger problem. When we look at how much compromise of organizations occurs from vulnerability exploit like that, yeah, it's a big number. But you know what? Y'all are just giving away passwords and letting people walk into your network, lay the bomb, light the fuse, and wait. Okay. So we're going to spend a bit of time on this. So phishing. Phishing is presenting you with a fake SharePoint, Dropbox, Salesforce, whatever, a fake login page, hoping that you're going to enter your credentials because you think you're going to get something on the other side of that. Now, if you look at the graph on the right here, data is a little older, comes from 2019, still accurate. Look at the rise in the number of sites that Microsoft has identified as phishing sites, because Microsoft knows when it sees a SharePoint login page and it's not a Microsoft.com domain. The corresponding drop in sites that will push malware onto you. Okay, why is that? Because the control that will reliably fail is the one between your ears. And criminals know this, right? The bait has gotten very good. They are now using consultants to make sure that the English comes across well. Artificial intelligence is now being used to create the bait messages, and there is no stopping this. Okay. So training you how to see this stuff is the best job we can do right now to stop this. All right. One way that credentials are abused is called credential stuffing. Yes, if you just give me your password, I will use it. All right. Credential stuffing is the acquisition of one of these big dumps of passwords that have been stolen. So, for example, when Yahoo was going through an acquisition, it had 1 billion passwords lifted. Okay. That did not help their valuation going through an acquisition negotiation. If we have those billion passwords, and we do, and lots of other people do, you can take all those passwords and start going one at a time. And I can try all of your accounts, and it's easy to find out where your bank account is, where your work account is. I can surmise that you use Amazon, PayPal, etc. And we can find all of your logins, and we can start using that billion passwords against your account. And by the time we get to, I don't know, 3,000 or so, we're going to get a hit. Because while there is an infinite number of passwords and passphrases that you can concoct for yourself, there's a top 100 that a whole lot of people use. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 turns out to be the most popular password. Okay. That is a self-inflicted wound. Okay. It doesn't need to be that way. If you use password managers, things like that, you don't have to rely on, well, I can't remember these things. You won't need to. All right. So it's really important to not only have unique passwords, don't share them anywhere, but have good complex passwords and even better multi-factor authentication. So just don't reuse passwords, right? I can take that billion passwords and I can throw it at you, or I can find your particular login in that Yahoo dump if you were in there, take that password and try it elsewhere. And if you shared it, I gotcha. All right. Now, all right. So we've looked at a couple of ways that they get into networks. Okay. Yes, we can break in from the outside because you don't patch your vulnerabilities, or we can just get you to give up a password. That last piece is the biggie. All right. So we're going to spend a long time here just looking at a whole lot of examples. First, there are things about us psychologically, our cognitive biases that aid these people, and they know this. All right. So, for example, authority bias. If you get something that looks like it came from the CEO, unconsciously, you're going to consider that to be something that you need to pay attention to. Right? You are influenced by someone with authority. Right? Hyperbolic discounting, free trials, limited time offers, things like this, like, oh, I better hurry up. All right. That is a psychological technique that is used in this messaging. All right. The curiosity effect. It's always, if there's something in the news that has just grabbed everybody's attention, like COVID did, of course there will be bait that is concocted trying to use that. I remember very early on when I was working for the city of Seattle, and we had a flood of stuff coming in, Saddam Hussein found alive. And of course, a bunch of people bid on it. So using recent events, especially those that are really attention grabby, is very successful. All right, there's tells all over this stuff. All right. So, right, if it says "Dear customer," you know what? Microsoft knows your name. Microsoft knows what your account name is, right? Urgency, right? That sense of urgency. That's one of trying to exploit one of those cognitive biases. Grammar is always in there. Looking at the return address, saying that's not really where it's supposed to be coming from. Seeing whether or not you are on the to line versus it went out as BCC to probably 10,000 recipients. Those are all ways to look at this and tell. The big thing is you didn't expect it. That is the biggest thing. Why is some yahoo on the internet sending me this? That's what you got to ask yourself. All right. Now, look, Microsoft will not send you this. You are not an administrator. You are a user. All right. Users don't get things like this. Now, look, dear Outlook user, dead giveaway right there. Microsoft knows your account name. All right. So, yes, there's grammar. Yes, things like that. What we want you to take away from this more than the details here are the techniques. All right. Like that last one that I showed you, right? That's a technique, right? When we talk about business email compromise and, for example, getting a letter from or email from the CEO saying, buy me gift cards, that's a technique, that's a tactic. Okay. That's the one you got to burn into your mind. Here's another one. Microsoft telling you you're out of space. All right. Classic technique, or your account is going to be terminated if you don't change your password. All right. You won't receive this from Microsoft. No, companies are not going to give you free stuff for your opinion. No, they won't. This stuff is all over. It's Costco, it's Lowe's, it's Home Depot, it's Starbucks, it's, here's free stuff. Just fill out our survey. No, don't fill out the survey. And notice, limited supply, 9 rewards remaining. Okay. Again, cognitively, that sense of urgency there can spur us to move on something. Okay. Become resistant to that. Hey, you know what? Does this look too good to be true? Wow, I can get $350 to $450 for 20 to 30 minutes of work. Hook me up. No, this is too good to be true. Obviously, it came from someone you don't know. That's not a known phone number. You didn't expect it. It came out of the blue. And here's a link for you to hit. No, do not hit the link. All right, here's a recent campaign coming from LinkedIn. LinkedIn has turned into a bit of a cyber attack cesspool, we can call it. But here's a good example. So we get this message from LinkedIn, your profile matches this job. And there was a whole lot of this going on for a while. It was, Clorox and Boeing and big corporations want to hire you. Okay. Well, this thing's trying to get you to download this LinkedIn app. And if you hover over the link, you see that this points to a dental office. So you're going, ha, 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 ha. You didn't fool me. You see the return address there, gburke@ionvillage.com. Ha, nothing checks out here. All right, good job. Take it a step further. Grab that link, that URL, and put it into virustotal.com. And you can confirm for yourself exactly how bad that is. And you could be laughing all the way down the hallway when you go tell security people that you avoided this. Okay. Virustotal.com, great service. This came to me today. All right. So this is as fresh as you can get. Remember, it's not always a URL. It can now be a QR code. Don't scan this code. All right. You're looking at a malware code right there. Don't scan this off your screen. If you do, it's on you. All right. Now, we have seen up close and personal multi-factor authentication defeated in less than a minute. All right. So here's my reasonably well-informed assumption. If you scan this code, there's a script waiting on the other end at a website, okay, because this is a URL. And what it's going to do, it's going to strip the session token off of that transaction, and then it's going to present that session token to Microsoft, right? Microsoft is going to go, hey, you got a valid session, but I've never seen your device before. I'm challenging you for that second factor. And now if that is routed back to the user who scanned this, you get that second factor, because this is telling you right here, multi-factor one-time password authentication. Okay. It wants you to do it's warming you up. You're going to get that second factor challenge. And if you enter that second factor, you just gave away the farm to somebody who now has access to Teams, SharePoint, Office 365, all of the single sign-on applications, and you probably just lost the farm. Okay, this is an increasingly common tactic as well. Hey, did you buy this thing? All right. I don't know of a retail, bank, any organization at all that after a transaction comes back to you and says, hey, did you really buy this? All right. This was going on a lot in the middle of COVID when people were buying Pelotons at home. There were a lot of fake receipts. Hey, did you buy this Peloton? Because it's about to be delivered. And if you want to dispute this, here's a phone number to call. Don't call the phone number because they're going to talk you out of your payment details, and then they're going to own your PayPal account. Okay. Now, we knew when the apps came out for tracking COVID. And if you have the app on your phone, you will be notified if your phone has been in near proximity to another phone owned by a person who has tested positive. Okay. We knew when this stuff came out, this was going to get gamed, and it got gamed. Right. So here's a text message. It did not come over the app that you're supposed to use for these kinds of communications. It came through as a text message from an unknown number. And it said, someone who came in contact with you, blah, 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 click here. Right. Now, that's exploiting your anxiety about a pandemic in progress. And your first thing to cross your mind is, I got to see this. But you need to pull yourself back. Your first reaction should be, I didn't expect this. It doesn't come from any known user. You're probably not thinking these messages are really supposed to come through the app if you have the app, but because it's unknown, it's unexpected, and you remember this tactic, people sending you links to stuff with no warning, okay, you can avoid this. It's not just email, it's social media, it's text messages, it's everything. Okay, here's just for the sake of completeness, here's a fake Facebook message. Click here to update your account online. Okay, where's the dead giveaway here? Dear Facebook user, Facebook knows your damn name. I dumped them a long time ago because I don't like creepy tracking, but Facebook is supposed to know your damn name, and it's never going to write Dear Facebook user. What do you think happens if you hit update? You're going to be presented with a login page. Okay. If you study the URL, you'll see it has nothing to do with Facebook, but it will look like that. When something pops up and it asks you for a password and you did not expect it and you're already logged in, stop what you were doing. Look very carefully at all the information in front of you. Ask a question if you need to, and you're probably just going to delete and move on. Okay. This is going on a lot right now too, and especially social media. For whatever reason, Kelly here, who is a friend of mine, okay, this came from Kelly Bannon's account, but it's not kelly.b at polychrome.lk because I know she doesn't live in Sri Lanka. But her some social media, probably Facebook account was compromised. And a long time ago, I did have a Facebook account and I was friends with her. And so bad guy here got a hold of her password, got the list of all of the people in her friends list, and is now trying to propagate this and gather more credentials and get further and further into this community of people. All right. When you get a link and it has no context like this, you can just bet it's bad. All right. When I got this, I mean, this did come to me. When I got this, I got a hold of Kelly and said, Kelly, you got to change your password because your account's compromised. All right, some stuff on phones and device real quick. All right, as Fred mentioned, social engineering is a highly effective technique. And when it comes over the phone, you're probably not as resistant to it as you are after we've been talking about all this computer stuff and email and text messaging and social media and all of this. All right. But there are a lot of scams that are going on now. And if you don't believe me, talk to me about your extended warranty. This one grandchild in trouble here is a classic scam. Hey, grandpa, I was in Spain on spring break and they threw me in jail and I need you to bail me out. All right. I know that we, as a company that does penetration testing, breaking into computer networks, as well as kicking people out of computer networks, If we're having troubles, hey, you know what? We'll get a hold of your help desk, and we will pose as a user, and we'll say, listen, just I'm going to give you a URL. Just use the browser, go to this URL, and you'll see exactly the problem I'm having. And when they do it, we gotcha. Okay. So when somebody says something over the phone, you need to verify it as independently as possible. And remember, today, it is quite possible to emulate someone's voice exactly with just a few seconds of sampled voice, right? Artificial intelligence can clone that voice, and then you just type what that voice needs to say, and you're having a communication there, and you're going to fool somebody. So that bottom headline there is only a couple of weeks old. Okay, if you're one of the app people that has to just download apps all the time, and this is, teenagers, high schoolers, especially bad about this. There are so many apps that have to be removed from these stores all the time. There you go. 1.43 million apps in 2022, right? In 2023 is on pace to exceed that. So when you're going to download an app, how long has it been in the store? How many people have downloaded it? How is it rated? How many people rated it? A 5-star rating from 3 people means nothing, right? So be very careful about these things. And really, it's good to very tightly limit what you have on your phone, to tell you the truth. Removable media. So Fred talked about this as well. If you have a high schooler at home and that high schooler has a USB stick that they use to move data, don't touch it. All right. When you are at a conference and they are giving away USB sticks, don't take them. All right. Buy the one you want. Use that one exclusively. Don't share it. Again, we break into computer networks. If we're having problems, we'll throw them in parking lots and bathrooms and wait, and it always works. All right. Don't take them at conferences. And the FBI, frankly, just got religion about this as well. And this may be a little overhyped, but the FBI is saying that don't use airport charging stations. Okay, just a couple of do's and don'ts, and then I'm going to turn it back to Ellie. All right, what we hope you're taking away from this: the internet, as you interact with it, is not a friendly place. It has become this cesspool that wants to sell to you, steal from you, and manipulate your opinion. And it's gotten really good at doing that last one. And here comes an election. All right. So you're going to need to kind of tighten up your ability to fend all of this off. All right. Your passwords are the prime focus. That just makes it easy. Give me your password. I gotcha. All right. The bait is coming from all places: text messages, phone calls, social media, email, you name it. And now it's targeted. So now, for example, in BEC, business email compromise, they're going to go on LinkedIn. They're going to find out who moves money, who reports to who can authorize the movement of money. And then they're going to start emulating those. Don't follow links you get in personal email. Okay. We could prove that 40% of the compromised assets in a network generally come from the use of personal email. Look at that last bullet. Personal use is best conducted on a personal device, right? Facebook lives here. Gmail lives here. Makes 40% of the problem go off a cliff, right? Don't circumvent security controls. They're in there for a reason. Don't reuse passwords, obviously. Don't investigate USB sticks because you want to find their owner. Use multi-factor authentication. Use full disk encryption. Above all, if you see something, say something. Something weird happens, you're going to have to tell somebody. There will be someone to tell in your organization if your computer isn't acting right, and they can help you out. Don't just keep moving. All right. Ellie, what's coming up?
All right. We have a couple things coming up on the docket on our end. So if you enjoyed hearing Fred and Mike speed talk through a lot of information, I promise that we go a little bit slower on other content as well. We have an upcoming panel discussion on the healthcare breach report for the first half of this year. That's basically just a combination of all the different breaches that happen. We look for trends, so you don't have to do that heavy lifting there. And then we also have another webinar coming up with John Rigi, who's with the American Hospital Association. And we're just going to be talking about kind of the latest guidelines, because they are ever changing, just to keep you guys up to date as best as we can. Additional resources that we have, these links, you can see that they are safe. So definitely hover over any links. And as I say that, I'm going to have Ginny, one of our colleagues, she's going to put in the chat a Calendly link. So if you wanted additional information, because we did speed through a lot of this, feel free to book some time there just to answer any additional questions that you might have. And also there's going to be a survey link in there as well. So let us know how we did. If you wanted Fred to talk more, Mike to talk less, if you wanted me to run the whole thing, let us know. And we can quickly make those changes as well. But we appreciate you guys being here, and we are right at time. So thank you guys so much, and reach out if you have any questions.
Thanks,
and
everyone.
thank you all for attending, because you know what, if your radar is up and another hospital doesn't fall over, we feel like we've done our jobs. This is right on mission for us. So thank you for being here.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. And Mike Gross for telling us we did okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.